Hi there, folks, and welcome to this episode of Michael's Backyard Marina. Yesterday, I picked up this interesting old motor. It was advertised as a 1972 Evinrude Fastwin. Once I looked up the serial number, it's actually a 1970. But quite honestly, this is 2020, folks. If it's a 1970 or 72, not really much difference. We're not talking a lot of change in age, design, or style. So I'm pretty pleased with it. It's pretty clean overall. It seems to shift. The guy I bought it from lives near a lake that they just changed to a no wake or a horsepower limited lake. Uses like a 10 horsepower or less lake. He had an 18 horse on his boat, and that's what he used for fishing. So he went out and got himself an Evinrude 6 horse fisherman. And he didn't need this anymore, so he sold it to me. So we're going to go through it here. The only problem he said he knew of that it had, and it looks like the kill switch has been changed out with another kill switch. But he said that when you got into the upper RPMs, that it would start to kill. It would start to choke out. He thought it was a carburetor issue. I have a sneaky suspicion just from that description, it could be a fuel pump or a fuel line issue or something like that. I don't have the tank and fuel line that he had with it. I'm going to have a brand new tank basically and fuel line on it. But I will put a clear fuel line from the fuel pump to the carburetor so I can actually see what kind of fuel flow we have going on. Without further ado, we're going to go down and change the gearbox oil and see what we have down there and see if we've got any seal issues on that end. After we do that, we're going to take a look at that water pump. Let's get after it right now. We'll go ahead and pull this bottom drain plug out and see what comes out. Hopefully nothing but oil. Oh yeah, she's dark. Woo, she is so dark. Look at that. That's some really been in there a long time gear oil. All right, we're gonna fill her back full of some brand new gearbox oil. And on one that's this dirty, what I'm gonna do is fill it up and I'll test run it in a barrel. And before I take it out on the lake, I'm going to drain and refill it one more time just to see if I can make sure I get as much of that old black gear oil out of there as I can, because that's nasty looking and nasty smelling. Whew. Now looking at this outboard, this is not the original, or this is most likely the original prop. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm looking at the condition of it, and the condition of this prop is absolutely outstanding. We're going to pull that prop off next, and we're going to take a look at that shaft, make sure there's no fishing line wrapped around it. Now you guys might be talking about how many times I've shown people what to do on these different steps throughout the process. Throughout the process of checking a motor over and getting it ready for the water and meeting up, hopefully holding up and giving you a positive outboarding experience. So you might have seen me do this 100 times. Well, you haven't seen me do it 100 times, but you might see me do this a bunch. But I'm going to do it on every outboard that's different, whether it's an 18 horse, a 20 horse, 10 horse, 4 horse, just so everybody gets the same experience, because most people are just looking for their particular motor. You can skip past some of this parts if you want, if it doesn't interest you, and get on to the meat and potatoes. This is a 9x10 pitch prop. Everything looks really good, other than it has no grease on it. I'm going to put a little grease on it and put it back together. Well, with the cotter pin back in place and the nut back on, this part's done. Now we're going to take a look at that water pump. One of the first things you're going to do to remove the gearbox so you can get at the water pump is remove this little access cover here. Underneath here is going to have your shift shaft coupler. Right there you can see there's 2 nuts. You're going to take the bottom one loose. You'll want to remove the screw completely. Next order of business will be to remove 5 bolts. One here, one here, one here, and there's 2 opposite of these 2 on the other side. These 4 require a 7/16 socket. This upper one requires a 9/16. Once that last bolt is loose, you should be able to bump this out by hand, just like that. Now, as all of you know, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, no matter what motor I'm working on or outboard I'm working on, I'm checking the impeller for the condition of the impeller. Also, and this is before I even run the motor, because I have no idea how long it's been since it's been changed. So we'll pull this little spacer shaft with an O-rings on it. We'll pull that off. Now we'll take off the 3 screws that hold the pump housing down. This impeller really isn't in awful shape. You can see that the tips are worn off a little bit. It would have still pumped water. Obviously that's not in bad shape, but we're going to put a new one in. Next, you want to remove your drive pin. Little tiny drive pin. Got that pulled. Now that we have all the components cleaned up, let's put it back together. Does anybody remember how this goes? Just kidding. Now we've put some grease on these impellers because we don't want them to start up dry. It'll also help and aid in assembly. Give it a good shot of lasting a long time. At least until we change it again. Now once you got this down here, looking down on the shaft, you turn it clockwise while holding the housing still, and these impellers will just walk right into place. And it'll sit right down just like that. I've also replaced the water pump tube seal. The one that was in there was pretty crusty and stiff. So we'll put that in there. We put some lube on that so that goes together nice. We're going to put some fresh O-rings on this so that can go back together. And there's one diameter that's bigger than the other. This goes toward the gearbox. We'll get the new O-rings on and reassemble that. Now that we have the end of the shaft lubed, the end of the shift shaft's got some lube on it, the new seals with some lube on there, and the water pump tube gasket with lube on it, we're going to delicately slide this back up into place. And once you get up in there just far enough, you can see where that tube goes in. You got the tube alignment. Once the tube's aligned, now it's got to make sure the shift shaft gets into the right place. Once it's slipping in place, secure. Don't tighten it all the way down until you start to get all 4 of these bolts in. Now I like to put a little never seize on these just to help prevent corrosion getting in the way of servicing it next time. Now reinstall your shift shaft bolt. Now reinstall your cover plate, and you have completed the servicing of the bottom end of this outboard. Alrighty, now that we got the gearbox all dealt with and the water pump all dealt with, honest to goodness, this is no lie folks, I have not pulled this cover off yet. You guys are seeing it at the same time I'm seeing it for the first time, and you guys are probably asking, why did you do all that work on the bottom end when you haven't even looked at the top end? The guy told me it ran, and he told me what it was doing, so I'm not sure it's going to be all that bad. So let's pull it off here and take a look at what we got. Wow, that is a clean machine. Well, I can see right now what he might have had trouble with just at first glance. See if I can get you guys in here on the action, because this is like the cleanest motor I have seen for a 1970. Oh my goodness gracious, I am just thrilled with this thing. Now we have a lean rich mixture lever here is not connected, which that's not going to hurt anything. This screw is backed out a little ways, but as you can see here, these 2 wires are your kill wires, and they're not hooked to anything, and they're bare. So what happens when he was probably giving it to gas and winding this thing up, you guys see what that wire is doing right there? It's grounding out on the carburetor. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh my goodness gracious. Why? Why do people do stuff like that? But somebody that doesn't know, doesn't know. But yeah, there's wide open throttle position there. Looks good. I tell you what, I think I'm going to just connect these two wires back to the kill switch, and first I'm going to check her for spark. But quite frankly, I think we put gas to this thing, and I fixed this. Look at this. This is splitting out. Wow. Can't tell you how excited I am to see what's under the hood here, because this thing is one clean machine. Just for fun, we're going to jump inside here and let's check compression and look at these plugs. That don't look too bad. A little wet. Looks like it's burning good. Got some J6Cs. We're going to do a little quick lookup and see if that's the right plug. Okay, looking it up on the internet on marineengine.com, it says to use a J4C. Actually, it's a UJ4J, which translates to a J4C current day. It had a J6C in it. So we're going to put the proper J4C back in. Compression's on 100 pounds on both cylinders. Digging on that. All right, compression checked wonderful. We're going to go ahead and replace. I think I'm going to go ahead and replace both fuel lines with some new fuel line. I have it. Why risk not doing it? Alrighty, let me catch you up to what's happened here. I've got new fuel line on, clear fuel line. Fuel coming in is new. Fuel line coming out to the carburetor is new, clear. I've got, I repaired these wires for the kill switch. I checked the kill switch. It does seem to function properly, so we're going to give that a whirl. I think I'd like to put a rubber-coated bushing on here, or a rubber-coated button on here at some point in time, but that doesn't have to happen. Doesn't have to happen right now. I think all that's left to do now. We got compression. We got new spark plugs. Everything seems to work like it should. So we're going to give this thing throw it in the tank and see if she'll run. All right, we just about got the water full. I pumped the primer bulb up to full. I saw gas come through the fuel line, fill up the carburetor. We should be good to go. I'm seeing something that shouldn't be happening. When I pull this, it's making the throttle plate move, which that shouldn't be moving. See, when I pull this throttle plate here to the start position, watch when I pull this. Watch that, that's going to move back. See how I just grabbed it and moved it back? That should be clearance there. That shouldn't be making any contact. The last one I saw that on, which will be a freak of nature, will be this one has a cracked flywheel too. It's making contact where it shouldn't. Huh. Not digging on that. So I guess we'll go back and put it on the stand. We're not ready to start this bad boy now that I filled it full of gas. But that's why you test them here and not out on the lake. Well, I figured out what was going on, what was causing this to move while the flywheel was trying to spin. And somebody who looks like may have replaced this coil at some time. And this is rubbing on the flywheel ever so slightly. I was looking inside here, and I could see rub marks. That shouldn't have any contact at all. It's rubbing slightly, but it's just enough. Just enough to cause issues. And there's a machined surface right here on these things, on both sides, for both coils. And this is supposed to be flush with those. Well, this one's overhanging slightly on both sides. So we're going to have to just... That wasn't crazy tight there either. So we're just going to loosen those up and shove those back where they belong. Another problem. Wow. Another problem is there's a wire right here that's supposed to be hooked up, and it's not hooked up to anything. And that's the case on both sides. What the heck? I'll tell you. Well, let's see if we can get this fixed. Got to loosen up this screw too. It should move around some. Yeah, we got her moving there. Well, we discovered a few more issues. I went ahead and pulled this coil off. It's just these 3 screws lift the coil over this way and out around from the ignition wire. This just was a bare wire. There was no clip left on the end of it. This is your kill switch wire. Same way over here, they had the kill switch wire. I know it's hard to see here. Let's see if I can kind of get you up a little bit. Maybe you can see a little bit better. But over here, they had the kill switch wire not hooked up into the next to the points. So apparently they had some issues trying to figure out what was going on with this thing. Not realizing this was rubbing, causing issues. And but yeah, we're gonna put those back, back on that screw. We're gonna put this back in with the coil back on, and then we're gonna check the point gap, because my guess, if they messed all this stuff up, the point gap probably isn't set right either. In order to set the points, I usually put the nut back on here so I can rotate the crankshaft around. You're gonna see a little word on the points cam that says top. You want to put that right where the points. There's an arm opposite of the contact points over here. So you got your contact points here. You got your contact for the cam here. You want to have that right over the top. When that says top, that's where you want to set your 20 thousandths gap. We'll do that on both sides. Now I just discovered this little piece has been laying in there. It was laying down in here. Looks like an older connection, maybe to the kill switch wire, because it looks like that's been replaced. Just left laying in there. That could cause some grounding issues. No wonder this thing had some intermittent running problems, if it ran at all. Because what I'm discovering is between the rubbage and, from what I'm seeing, the points gap being completely out of whack. Surprised it even made any noise at all. Okay, now that we've got the points all adjusted, we're ready to put the flywheel back on and see what's going on there. Or not see what's going on, but we're going to check for spark. I should have went with my gut instinct from the word go, knowing that somebody had possibly been under here. Check it and just check it out. Double check my points. Silly me for not doing that. I won't make that mistake again. Fortunately, I wasn't out on the lake trying to start it. I always run it in my test barrel or with a set of muffs to see if anything's going to go right before you even think about heading to the lake. I can see here that somebody is putting a fairly new condenser on this side. The points look pretty new. They're really clean. And this coil has been replaced. So we've seen a lot of things that's been touched under here. So what I'm going to do, both of them had spark, but one of them wasn't as good as the other cylinder. So that should have clued me in that I need to get underneath this flywheel and take a look at some things. We found wires that were disconnected. We found stray pieces of metal in here that shouldn't have been here, connecting pieces. So anyway, each one of these should have 3 wires hooked to it. One's a condenser wire, one's a coil wire, and one is your kill switch wire for each one of these on this style of outboard. Now that we've got it back together and all working, let's check that spark, and I should have a nice fat spark on both cylinders. Well, as you saw, the motor ran, but it doesn't run very well yet. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to do some carburetor work, but I also have a ground wire issue. I ended up disconnecting, you can see it's stuffed down right here. I ended up disconnecting the kill switch wire from the condenser connection. It's a condenser and coil connection on the points. Well, because I had a dead short somewhere and I couldn't figure out what it was. Now, if you want to pull this plate off, you just take off these 2 screws that are into the coil, and there's 2 more Phillips head screws down here next to each one, right across from it, and disconnect your arm. There's a lever over here. It's hard to see. I'll show you when I lift this off. But there's this arm right here, and it connects right here, lays up over there, and then this little keeper traps it down to keep it on that lug. But then you should be able to lift the whole assembly off. And what I discovered, as soon as I lifted it off, I don't know if you can see it right here. When somebody messed with this last, they pinched it right there. And that's the one that's grounded. That's going to this condenser wire. So we're going to replace this whole wire. I'm going to make it longer so it's one piece. doesn't have a connection any longer. We're going to do it right. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to go ahead and pull these plates off. And I'm going to replace this wire as well. That travels around underneath here. I'm going to put two brand new kill switch wires underneath there. And then we'll be able to put it back together. But that's how that whole assembly comes off. And this would be a good time if you do have bad plug wires. This would be a good time to, while you've got all this off, to replace your plug wires at the same time. Now, if you're a novice like me, you'll want to take a good picture of this layout so you can repeat it when you put it back together, because it's really easy to see where you might get confused on some loops and some wires and some routings. So make sure you take a good clear shot of that so you know exactly how it needs to go back together. Well, upon further inspection, as I took this off, I might have already shown you this. This has a wire that's kind of chewed up a little bit on the coil. And this coil is fairly new looking, but I decided, since I was going to replace this one, I decided to go ahead and order two. And I'm just going to replace them both. My rule of thumb when I'm working on some of this stuff, or most of this stuff, I'd say everything I do pretty much, is I do it as if I'm going to keep it for myself and use it long term and want to make sure it's reliable and all that kind of fun stuff. And I couldn't in good faith to myself just buy one and not know what's going on with this one. So it's like, let's just take them apart, replace both of them. Plus they're a cool color, and replace them both with brand new coils. And that way there's no doubt that everything should be working fine. No bare wires, no funky stuff going on. And we'll put this thing back together. So bear with me while I'm running new wires, the new kill switch wires back up through the rubber here. We'll get those connected, we'll get these put down, and we'll reroute the spark plug wires. The spark plug wires are in pretty good shape. They look fairly new. I think somebody has messed with it and replaced it. But I'm going to go ahead and nip off just a quarter inch maybe of this to get some fresh wire there to put back into these. These look like they're kind of threaded, so I want to be able to screw these on and get that buried up in there nice and deep and make a real good contact before I seat it back down onto the plate here. So we're going to time lapse through this a little bit, and I'll show you the finished product when I'm done. Alrighty, here we had, I had this thing, was working me over and tested my abilities of analyzation and being able to cipher out what happened here. Anyway, I'd put two new coils on this thing and ran all new wiring, put it back on the motor, checked for spark, and I only had spark in one cylinder. And I'm like, come on, everything is brand new. What could possibly be wrong? And finally, after about an hour of playing around with this thing and looking at ohming out stuff, checking wiring and whatnot, and I couldn't find it. I took these off to even check them. They were brand new, and I didn't know how much of it was could have been a bad new part. Well, then I got to looking as I reassembled for the third time. I've discovered it on this piece here. So I'm pretty sure I had I know I had a shorted wire on one side, and then when I put this back on, I inadvertently created another short. And I'm going to show you this right here. See if I can get this close enough. But you see the distance between here and where that wire's sitting? And you see that little cut right there? Well, if you look at the coils, how they're supposed to be, if you look at them side by side, see how much further this wire is up from this bottom edge? Well, there's an aluminum piece down in here that part of this plate rotates on. It sticks up. And it sticks up just high enough that when you bolt this down it would cut it. And it was like, my goodness gracious. Why? Why? So now I ended up having to use the old coil because this one can't be used because it's too close down. I could have ground down in there, but that's part of the piloted area that this thing rotates on, and I didn't want to mess with that. The other thing I did decide to go ahead and do is I put the brand new points on here. I went ahead and put a different brand of points on here than it was on it. These look fairly new, but if you look at them really close, I don't know if you can see that. They were only making contact in a very small area. They came together at a little bit of an angle. Things weren't quite up to snuff with these. So I put another brand in there. And if you guys message me, I want to know the brand, I'll text you the brand. Or I'll message you the brand. I'm not going to advertise for these folks because they're not sponsoring me. And but they do sit in there so much better. They actually, the contact surface is bigger, and they sit parallel. If you look at them across here, they're sitting tight and parallel with one another. Now we'll get this plate back on and get it adjusted, and we'll see if we have spark on both cylinders. But yeah, that one had me stumped. That little booger there had me stumped. And I'm going to contact the manufacturer and let them know that this is what I discovered and see if they'll send me a replacement, because that will not work. But hopefully I can get this back on now, even when I'm using the older new one and not the old one, because it had a wire that was, you probably re-insulate that, but this is old cloth insulation. This has been around a while. Let's just put a new one on and call it a day. All right, so this is all back together. Everything's nice and tidy back here. Let's reassemble this bad boy. All right, great news. I don't know if this will show up on camera, but now I have spark. Nice bright blue spark on both cylinders. That hat makes me so happy. Oh, effortless bright spark. Love it. All right. Now that we've got that done, we got ignition squared away, finally. I'm going to, let's go after this carburetor. Let's go ahead and pull this carburetor apart and let's see what's what on the inside. The only reason I'm taking it apart is I'm not sure there's anything wrong with the carburetor, but as much other stuff that was touched underneath the flywheel, I can't believe that somebody in their troubleshooting experience would have ignored the carburetor. So let's go ahead and pull it apart and see what we got going on inside there. If it's pretty clean, we'll flush it out and we'll go from there. Well, after looking through the carburetor and looking at how things seem to be functioning, and all the passageways seem really clear, the carburetor seemed really clean. And even this rubber that's on the end here, that's normally right here, I shouldn't say normally, it is right here, seemed to be really in really good shape, surprisingly good shape. And I think we're just going to, it's still soft and pliable, and it should seal like it should, so I don't see why we don't use it. So let's reassemble. Everything looks good, let's reassemble. We'll double check the float setting here. If we look at that float setting, it's not in too bad a shape. You want this basically to be parallel, the bottom edge of the float here to be parallel to the body, and that's sitting pretty darn good. We're gonna let that fly. All right, we're getting close to having her tuned up pretty well. Well, we did it, folks. We got the old Fastwin running. Still needs a little more tweaking and tuning. It's not quite tuned to the perfection I want it to be, but she starts and she runs, and when you rev her wide open, certainly seems like it would push the boat right along. But until you get it out in the water, or if I have a bigger, better test tank, which is coming soon, I'll be able to test it out and do a little more fine tuning and really get this thing teased out right. So I notice these things seems to be a little touchy on getting that throttle adjustment on with the cam. What I forget what you call it, where the throttle hits the cam, throttle cam maybe. Anyway, getting that all teased in just right so it runs, accelerates right. But she does run. I think it has potential to run really, really good. I think it's running really good right now, but I think it's got a chance to be a whole lot better. So you guys get out there and have some fun. Hope you enjoyed this video. This is Michael, and I'm out.